History remembers the famous Napoleon, Cleopatra, Einstein. But what about those who changed the world and then vanished into obscurity? From an emperor who vanished without a trace to a scientist whose inventions shaped modern warfare, these are the top 10 forgotten historical figures. Stick around for number 1, because this person's story is downright insane. Starting off at number 10, did you know that one of history's most feared inquisitors is almost forgotten today? Meet Tomás de Torquemada, the Grand Inquisitor of Spain, a man whose name once struck terror across Europe. Back in the 15th century, Torquemada led the Spanish Inquisition, a brutal campaign to enforce Catholic orthodoxy. Imagine secret trials, forced confessions, and thousands being exiled or worse. Yikes. He convinced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to expel Jews and Muslims from Spain in 1492. Yep, the same year Columbus set sail. But here's the twist. Torquemada himself had Jewish ancestry. Talk about irony. For a guy who controls so many lives, history barely remembers him. Maybe it's because he left no writings, no grand battles, just fear and secrecy. But his legacy? It shaped Spain for centuries. Should Torquemada be remembered more? Or does he belong in the shadows of history? Coming up next at number 9. Ever heard of Hiram Maxim? No? Well, he only changed warfare forever. Maxim was an American-born inventor who in the 1880s created the first fully automatic machine gun, the Maxim gun. Before this, soldiers had to reload and fire manually, but Maxim's invention? It could fire 600 rounds per minute. This game-changing weapon was quickly adopted by Britain, Germany, and other major powers, making wars deadlier than ever. Some even say World War I wouldn't have been the same without him. But here's the wild part. Maxim wasn't just about destruction. He also invented hair curlers, a flying machine, and even a steam-powered inhaler for asthma. Talk about range. So why is he forgotten? Maybe because his gun became bigger than his name. Unlike Edison or Tesla, he's remembered more for war than innovation. Should Hiram Maxim be seen as a genius or a harbinger of destruction? Next up at number 8. Ever heard of Queen Ranavalonai? Probably not, but she might just be one of the most ruthless rulers in history. In 1828, she took the throne of Madagascar and transformed the island into a fortress of terror. While Europe was colonizing Africa, Ranavalona said nope and kicked out all foreign influences, but at a deadly cost. She banned Christianity, cut ties with European traders, and ruled with an iron fist. Suspected traitors? She used the Tangena poison trial, a brutal test where victims had to swallow poison and eat raw chicken skin. If they survived, they were innocent. Spoiler, most didn't. But here's the craziest part. Her policies actually worked. For 33 years, she kept Madagascar independent while the rest of Africa fell to colonial rule. Her army built massive palaces, roads, and defenses, all under her harsh labor system. Some call her a tyrant, others a freedom fighter. But one thing's for sure, she was a force to be reckoned with. Up next at number 7. Ever heard of Ignaz Semmelweis? No? Well, he only saved millions of lives and got ignored for it. Back in the 1840s, hospitals were dangerous places. Mothers were dying from mysterious infections, and no one knew why, until Semmelweis, a Hungarian doctor, made a shocking discovery. He noticed that doctors went straight from autopsies to delivering babies without washing their hands. So he made them clean up with chlorinated water, and boom, death rates dropped from 18% to just 2%. You'd think he'd be hailed as a hero, right? Nope. Instead, doctors mocked him because they hated being told they were the problem. Semmelweis was ridiculed, lost his job, and was eventually locked in an asylum where he died at just 47 years old. Decades later, Louis Pasteur and germ theory proved he was 100% right, but by then it was too late for him. So why is Semmelweis forgotten? Maybe because he was too ahead of his time. But next time you wash your hands, thank Semmelweis. Next up at number 6, meet Michael Malloy, the unkillable man who turned a murder plot into the craziest survival story ever. In 1933, during the Great Depression, a group of shady guys in New York took out a huge life insurance policy on Malloy, a homeless Irishman who loved to drink. Their plan? Get him to drink himself to death and cash in. Easy, right? Wrong. Malloy kept drinking and drinking and drinking, but wouldn't die. So they poisoned his booze with antifreeze. He survived. They gave him turpentine, rat poison, and even pure methanol. Still alive. Frustrated, they left him in the freezing cold overnight. He woke up fine. They even ran him over with a car. Malloy showed up at the bar days later, asking for another drink. After all else failed, they finally suffocated him, but by then, police got suspicious. The killers were caught and sent to the electric chair. Michael Malloy went down as the toughest man to ever live, and yet almost no one remembers him. Halfway there, at number 5, ever heard of Emperor Nortonai? Probably not, but he was a real-life emperor, and not a single country recognized him. So who is this mysterious figure, and how did he become one of the most eccentric rulers in history? In 1859, Joshua Norton, a San Francisco businessman, declared himself Emperor of the United States, and later added the title of Protector of Mexico. You read that right. He just declared himself emperor, and somehow the people of San Francisco Francisco just went along with it. Norton wasn't some power-hungry dictator, though. Instead, he spent his days wandering the streets, dressed in military-style regalia and handing out royal decrees. And oddly enough, he gained huge respect in the city. He even printed his own money, which, believe it or not, became accepted in local businesses. But here's the wild part. Norton never actually had any real power. He didn't rule an empire, didn't have an army, and didn't even control a single piece of land. Yet his strange sense of royalty made him a beloved figure. The people of San Francisco threw him parades, hailed him as emperor, and even mourned his death like he was an actual ruler. So why is he forgotten? Perhaps because he was a pretend emperor in a world of real-world kings and presidents. Or maybe it's because his reign lacked the drama of more well-known monarchs. But one thing's for sure, Emperor Norton, I was a man of peculiar charm who captured the hearts of an entire city. Should he be remembered as a quirky legend or a forgotten fool? Up next at number 4, meet Sylvia Raphael, a spy who pulled off some of the most daring missions in history, yet remains surprisingly forgotten. Raphael was a top agent for Mossad, Israel's secret service, and she was involved in one of the most intense spy operations ever, the mission to track down and capture Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust. In the 1960s, Raphael went undercover in Argentina where Eichmann was hiding. She gained his trust, built a close relationship with him, and even had him believing she was just an innocent woman. But all along, she was collecting crucial information. When the time was right, Mossad agents swooped in, captured Eichmann, and smuggled him to Israel where he was put on trial. Raphael's spy work was key in bringing him to justice. But after the operation, Sylvia disappeared from the public eye. Unlike other famous spies, her name faded from history. Was it because she chose to remain undercover for life, or did her story just get overshadowed by other events? Either way, Sylvia Raphael's bravery and cleverness made a huge impact on one of the most important covert operations of the 20th century, and she should definitely be remembered for her role. What do you think? Should Sylvia's story be more famous? Up next at number 3. Ever heard of Adrien Carton de Wiart? Probably not, but this guy exemplifies resilience like no other. Born in 1880, Adrien was a soldier who fought in 3 different wars: the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. And get this, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a walking legend. During World War I, he was shot multiple times in the head, face, and leg. But here's the kicker, he didn't stop fighting. One of the bullets in his head was never even removed. Then, after losing his left hand in battle, he still went back to fighting. This guy was so hardcore that when asked if he'd ever been afraid in battle, he replied, "I have had the misfortune to be afraid once, and I hope I never have to repeat the experience." In fact, after World War I, Carton de Wiart survived a plane crash and was captured by the enemy during World War II. Yet still, he escaped and returned to action. Despite all this, he's hardly remembered today. Why? Maybe because his story doesn't fit the typical war hero mold, or maybe because he was too humble for fame. Either way, Adrien Carton de Wiart was one of the toughest men ever to walk this earth, and his legacy deserves recognition. Coming up next at number 2, meet José Gaspar, a pirate king who terrorized the Gulf Coast in the early 19th century, and yet he's barely remembered today. Known as Gasparilla, José Gaspar wasn't your typical pirate. He was born in Spain, but became a legend of the Florida coast. For decades, he led a ruthless band of pirates who raided ships, plundered treasures, and controlled the seas like true outlaws. What's fascinating, Gaspar was never captured, and stories about his pirate hideouts and daring escapes were the stuff of legend. He's said to have burned ships, outwitted the law, and left behind a treasure still rumored to be hidden today. But here's the twist. There's a good chance José Gaspar never even existed. Some historians believe his story was exaggerated over time, built up by pirate folklore and local legends. But that doesn't stop him from being remembered as one of the most mysterious and exciting figures in pirate history. So why is José Gaspar forgotten? Maybe because his tale mixes myth and reality, making it hard to separate fact from fiction. But regardless, his legacy lives on in the annual Gasparilla Pirate Festival in Tampa, Florida, where he's still celebrated as the Pirate King. At last but not least, you've probably heard of Grigory Rasputin, the Russian mystic who weaseled his way into the royal court. But there's so much more to this mysterious figure than meets the eye. Rasputin wasn't just a mad monk. He was an influential figure in Tsarist Russia during the early 1900s. He gained fame for his supposed healing powers, especially when he cured Tsarina Alexandra's son from hemophilia, a rare blood disorder. This made him incredibly close to the royal family, and soon Rasputin's influence grew to the point that he had the ear of the Tsar himself. But Rasputin was no saint. He was rumored to be involved in orgies, scandals, and even dark magic. Despite his questionable behavior, many believed he had an almost magical political hold over the royal family. He was even accused of manipulating political decisions from behind the scenes. But here's the crazy part. Rasputin's death is just as mysterious as his life. After multiple poisoning attempts, he was finally shot in the back, but still didn't die. He allegedly tried to escape, but was shot again, this time fatally. It's one of the most bizarre deaths in history. So why is Rasputin forgotten by so many? Maybe it's because his infamous reputation overshadows the more complicated sides of his life. Regardless, Rasputin remains one of the most fascinating and mysterious figures from Russian history.